Alright, this is the structure of a long bone anatomy lecture part 2. We're going to look at a more detailed analysis of what is going on inside of this bone. To that end, I'm going to pull up my blue marker here and I'm going to outline the edges of this existing bone. So go ahead and do that. And what this is going to represent is the bark or the cortex or the outside covering of what this long bone is. So let me label that with this marker. Please do label it in the bottom right corner, like so. I'm actually going to use black here, because you have a microscopic slide sort of image on your notes on your page. So please do put it in this corner here. I'm going to label this something called compact bone. Sometimes you'll hear it called lamellar bone. In either case, we'll just use compact bone. It really gets to the heart of what it actually is. And what it is, it's really dense. It's really well put together. It's heavy. It's made out of these dense columns of bone cells, which are called osteons. Osteon relating to the prefix for bone. So it's made of these very tightly packed columns of bone cells wrapped together. If you look at it from the top down, you'll see these concentric circles, which you have as a slide there. So compact bone makes the outside covering of your bone really strong, really great for protecting you. Compact bone, very dense. Next thing we're going to look at are the epiphyses, the two ends here, and they're made of something more particular called spongy bone. So I'm going to take my blue still to indicate that it's still bone. I'm going to draw these packed circles to indicate that this bone has these large sort of holes in it. It's not spongy soft like an actual sponge, but it has these large holes. What that allows it to do is to stay still very strong, not quite as strong as compact bone, but still really strong, but it allows the bones to be really light. So let me label this as spongy bone. You might hear this called trabecular bone as well. Spongy bone. Here we go. It's going to be less dense, but it keeps the bone lightweight. I'm just going to write light. Keeps bone light. So we talked about the fact that your bone pound for pound is stronger than steel. That's because you get a lot of bang for your buck. You get a lot of efficiency when you start introducing the spongy bone. It's a very different structure when you look at it under a microscope, as you can see on your notes. Next thing, I'm going to pull up a red marker. I'll wait for a second for that to happen. Mine's sort of a pinkish color. And I'm going to color in these ends, or both epiphyses, both the distal and proximal epiphyses. Hopefully those words are starting to sink in. Similar to the previous diagram, and the reason we're using red here is because this is actually one of the two types of bone marrow we will talk about, which is red bone marrow. So let me label that here. I'm going to draw it to the red, and this is red, red bone marrow. And as might be somewhat intuitive, red bone marrow is responsible for making all of your blood cells, primarily because they contain something we're going to abbreviate called HSCs, and it stands for hematopoietic stem cells. Let me spell that out. HEMATOPOIETIC stem cells. And hopefully you know that stem cells are cells that are capable of becoming multiple types of cells. Hematopoiesis relates to the making of new blood. So hematopoietic stem cells. These are cells that are capable of undergoing mitosis, differentiating, dividing, and becoming all types of blood. This includes red blood cells, white blood cells, even platelets. I haven't taught you about blood. We have not yet covered the circulatory system, so for now just know that it covers all types of blood, but if you're curious, this does make all types of blood cells. For your interest, the way that this is stimulated is a hormone that can be abbreviated EPO that is made in your kidneys, and I'm going to try to draw a kidney. Let me color it maybe in brown. So you sort of get an idea that it's a kidney. And what EPO does is it senses the volume of blood as blood is being filtered through the kidney. And let's say you lose a lot of blood because you're hurt, or maybe you donate blood. Once the amount of blood in your body is less, there's less volume, your kidney releases a lot of EPO, which stimulates the hematopoietic stem cells in your blood to make primarily more red blood cells to fill up that volume, so you know that it's gone. All right. So far we have two types of bone. We have compact bone surrounding the edges of this bone in blue, making sure all ends of it are really tough, really dense. And then we have spongy bone and the epiphyses, keeping it light. Still strong, not as strong, but light. And then in the epiphyses, we have red bone marrow sort of interspersed into the spongy bone. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in with an orange marker something called the marrow cavity, and I'm going to color that in yellow, and please do use yellow for this. It's yellow for a very specific reason, and the reason that it's yellow is I'm going to label it yellow bone marrow. So here it is, yellow bone marrow, as opposed to red bone marrow. So let me underline this piece. This is all that yellow stuff in there. What yellow bone marrow is its fat storage. So the same reason we might color the hypodermis, your third layer of skin, arguably yellow. We're also going to color the diaphysis of most long bones yellow because it's made of yellow bone marrow. Two more points. One is that this bone starts much shorter when you're little and continuously grows until puberty or just after puberty. And how this happens is something called an epiphyseal growth plate. And I'm very bad at spelling this, so this might be wrong, and I might correct you in class. And it's made of these plates, and you'll actually see the lines if you look at like a microscope. And it's basically these stem cells, they start off as cartilage, and as those grow, the bone will elongate. And we will talk about bone growth in more detail. I just want you to know about these growth plates as we're going in here. So let me label this epiphyseal. Epi relating to the epiphysis, so it's located in the epiphysis, and then epiphyseal, sort of a derivative of that, growth plates. So if you are bones, if you're a forensic scientist, this is how you actually can tell from looking at someone's femur or someone's tibia about how old somebody is. Because if you are in your 30s or your 40s, your growth plate is very much fused. It's no longer active. You're not going to be growing a lot. But if you're in your teens or in your younger, you're going to see a lot of activity in the cells of this region, and it has a very particular structure. And I believe I showed you that in class. If not, please ask me. So the growth plate is how bones get longer. The last piece I want to talk about is the fact that every single cell in this whole structure of the long bone is very much alive. So that means that every cell needs access to oxygen, to nutrients, basically to blood flow. So I'm going to take a black marker. I'm just going to represent this one little spot, but just know that it occurs everywhere. I'm going to label this something called the nutrient, because it delivers nutrients, foramens. I'm going to pick a red marker and have that go in to imply that this is where blood vessels are allowed into the bone structure here. And that's it. Let me do a quick review. So at the edges of the bone, we first outlined it in blue to indicate that it's compact bone, very dense, made of osteons. Then we colored in those edges of the spongy bone, which are in the epiphyses, with those circles to indicate that it's spongy, it's trabecular, it's less dense, but it keeps the bone very lightweight so you can move, so you have that ability there. Next, we colored in the epiphyses in red, or in sort of a pinkish color here, to represent red bone marrow, where hematopoiesis, or the formation of new blood cells, occur. Then we colored in yellow, the yellow bone marrow and the diaphysis, which fills up most of that region here in that cavity, which allows nutrients to come in back and forth via the nutrient foramens. And then finally we have this epiphyseal growth plate on both ends of the epiphysis, which allows for growth. And what that looks like will change depending on your age. So again, this is a detailed look at more of the internal anatomy or structures of a long bone. And from now on, I want you to really think about how each of these structures allows the bone to do its job. In other words, how does form follow function? How does the anatomy of the bone allow the skeletal system to perform its physiology right here? All right, you guys are great. Thank you.